time periods for your brain. But the blue essence, the light of the CSF, that represents a continuum of energy within the fluid that is ever present, regardless of age. So the majority of the roles in the CSF that we know about today are listed here. It transports nutrients and hormones. It regulates the circadian rhythm. It regulates appetite, provides guiding cues for cell migration, instructs stem cells to proliferate or differentiate, creates an ionic balance, eliminates waste, supports and protects the central nervous system, creates a buoyancy and shock absorption for the brain. What else could it do? Here we see two quotes from Dr. Randolph Stone, the founder of Polarity Therapy, a holistic healthcare system. The soul swims in the CSF. The cerebrospinal fluid seems to act as a storage field and a conveyor for the ultrasonic and light energies. This is a quote from Dr. Sutherland, one of the founders of cranial osteopathy, who said this about one of his teachers. Dr. Still envisioned the cerebrospinal fluid as an intermediary in the movement of divine intelligence, a channeling of creation into embryologic segments and irrigating them with life, giving form and function and order and intelligence to our existence. Just as flower remedies demonstrate that water is able to absorb, store, and transmit energy of plants, or as Dr. Emoto showed, that water could store the energy of words, the cerebrospinal fluid may absorb, store, and transmit the essence of the source and allow us to experience and be aware or conscious of our beingness. As I mentioned, the CSF covers the entire outside of your brain. Let's take a look at the CSF on the inside and allow the structure of the ventricles to help us understand its function. Why are the ventricles of the brain formed the way they are? The blue structures you see here are the ventricles in your brain. Pretty interesting structures, okay? This is the lateral ventricle. Why does it have to make contact with the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe? Why is there this little beak back here that actually has to go back and project into your visual center of the brain for optic? Why is the third ventricle here created such that it has this little beak that goes all the way out and contacts the pituitary gland? Or this little structure in back that needs to make contact with the pineal gland? What do the cells look like that contact the CSF? This is a scanning electron microscope image of the wall of the ventricle. So the inside of the wall of the ventricle that's making contact with the CSF. What we see is that these cells have cilia on them, or what we call some slender-like antennae. These cilia can beat to create fluid-like movements. They're also like little antennae monitoring the fluid. They have receptors on them to pick up information. What are some of those receptors? There's photoreceptors that pick up information about light. There's chemoreceptors that pick up information about growth factors, ions, hormones. And there's also mechanoreceptors that pick up information regarding the flow, movement, and vibrations that are actually occurring in my head. Just to give you a sense, two important molecules that are found in the CSF are melatonin and DMT, each derived from tryptophan and believed to be released by the pineal gland into the CSF. Melatonin regulates sleep-wake cycles and is important for circadian rhythms. DMT is found widespread in the plant kingdom. DMT-containing plants are used widely for shamanic rituals to produce powerful psychedelic, near-death, and mystical experiences. And the endogenous function of DMT is still not known. However, it is hypothesized that it's released at birth, death, and during vivid dreams. Imagine, therefore, for a minute, that the CSF, as a vehicle of transmission of information, quickly something gets released in the CSF. It can transmit that signal to multiple parts of the brain simultaneously, using no synapse, with total synchronization of your brain at once. After I gave my talk a few years ago, many people wrote to me and described a fluid-like wave bathing their spine, rising from the sacrum to the crown during a Kundalini awakening. So I wanted to touch on that for a moment. The Kundalini in yogic theory is a primal energy located at the base of the spine. Some say residing in the sacrum, like a sleeping serpent waiting to be awakened. Yogic practice of Kundalini is awakened and physically moves up the central canal, the Sushumna, to reach the third eye and subsequently the crown chakra for awakening to occur. Could the CSF actually be a transporter of this primal energy? Let's take a look at some of the anatomy. The sacrum is a large triangular bone at the base of your spine. The origin of the word comes from the Latin os sacrum, which means sacred bone. The end of the spinal cord, as I mentioned, is approximately L2, and the CSF goes all the way down to about sacral level 2 or 3, shown there. Interestingly, there's a filament called filum terminale that goes all the way from the bottom of the spinal cord to the coccyx. Remember, within the spinal cord, there's a canal filled with fluid that goes all the way up the spinal cord, middle of the fluid, into your third ventricle. Some people claim there's a small fiber even within that canal of the spinal cord that is made of condensed CSF proteins that goes all the way to the pineal gland. Here are the words of Swami Vivekananda. See how these words relate to the anatomy that was just described. According to the yoga,